The dramatic fallout from Ellie Saves the Day continues here as tensions in the Ewing family and everyone that surrounds them come to a head. And of course they do so in the most Ewing of ways.
Bobby, as far as I'm concerned, I'm an only child.
The title Mother of the Year could refer to Miss Ellie's efforts to bail out the family by making the ultimate sacrifice of her legacy. It could be applied ironically to Sue Ellen, who is still struggling to connect with John Ross III, or it could refer to Pamela, who is inappropriately single white femaling her way into the role as John Ross's surrogate mom. However you want to apply it, that's where the three women are as we open the episode. Sue Ellen gets up to quiet a crying baby John, but Pamela has already beaten her to it. Sue Ellen overhears Mrs. Reeves criticizing her for not taking an active role as a parent. JR joins in the criticism, chastising her for being an absentee mother. He says that everyone has been talking behind her back about how bad she is as a mother. He also questions why he's even paying for therapy, and she rightly shoots back that he should consider his own therapy to become a decent father and husband. JR dumps some old-fashioned sexism on her by saying the baby is her responsibility. Meanwhile, Bobby and Pam are having the opposite argument, with Bobby reminding Pam that Lil John is not her responsibility. Miss Ellie and Jock look on in sadness as the crew readies the derricks at Section 40. Ellie laments that they should have done something about JR years ago and blames Jock for creating a money-grubbing sociopath. My words. Jock's defense is basically that he enjoys sewing, but he had no idea that there would be reaping later on. Ray Krebbs, meanwhile, is busy taking Ellie's advice from the last episode and putting roots down on his section of South Fork. At the offices of Ewing Oil, Jock enlists Von Leland to gather a consortium to buy the Asian oil well leases at a 25% loss for the Ewings. Bobby and JR both object to that deal, but Jock puts Miss Ellie's feelings over money. It's odd that Bobby would object here, even though he's often the level-headed one when it comes to business. Good on Jock for modeling good behavior.
I'm going to do everything I can to stop it, you understand?
JR's slink out of the room is a great piece of acting from Larry Hagman. It accomplished the impossible, getting me to feel sorry for JR after what he pulled. Bobby tries to make amends, but JR declares himself an only child. Hey, what did Gary do? Sue Ellen returns to the Daughters of the Alamo, which winds up being a mistake as she runs into Cliff Barnes. Cliff tries to pressure her to meet, but she storms off. JR wanders in on Sue Ellen venting to John Ross and mistakes it for parenting. We get a great moment as baby John starts to cry, and both parents develop the 1,000-yard stare of helplessness. JR and Alan Beam meet, clandestinely of course, and JR says to spend the rest of the donation money on Barnes for Congress and then cut him off. Alan asks what's next and is disappointed when JR doesn't talk about the future of their relationship.
Oh, who am I kidding? The boathouse was the time.
Sue Ellen gets upset that Dr. Ellby won't tell her how to solve her man problems. Instead, he wants her to build independence and self-confidence. Quack. The session does give Sue Ellen the gumption to have a brawl with Cliff Barnes that has been building since For Love or Money. To recap, Sue Ellen's destitute single mother raised her and her sister as the perfect trophy-wives for the rich and powerful.
What I am looking at is how hard you have worked to turn me into the perfect wife for him.
And I succeeded. When your father died, that's all I devoted my life to.
Beauty queen Sue Ellen caught the eye of burgeoning oil magnate J.R. Ewing, and Sue Ellen was settled into a loveless but financially stable marriage when the show began. The combination of living with a couple that was affectionate toward one another, and JR's philandering finally spilling out into the open, motivated Sue Ellen to hook up with JR's mortal enemy Cliff Barnes. Sue Ellen became pregnant during the affair, and everyone, including JR, believes John Ross III is Cliff's child. JR, not wanting to be humiliated in front of his parents in the Dallas social scene, offered Cliff a choice: Sue Ellen and a scandal that would derail his political career, or silence and appointment to the Office of Land Management. Cliff chose the job over the woman. Sue Ellen rightly says that Cliff is a weasel who just wanted to have an affair with JR's wife. And that doesn't give him the right to know her or the baby since he walked away for the job. Cliff calls Sue Ellen a parasite who is incapable of love and only uses men for her own gain. Cliff is, unsurprisingly, way off base here. As we saw Sue Ellen deeply in love with JR early in the series and shattered and humiliated that he'd cheat on her so brazenly. And she was willing to leave JR for Cliff, despite Cliff having only a fraction of the wealth and power of JR Ewing. JR tries to blackmail Von Leland into stalling Jock's sale of the Asian oil well leases, but Von says he can't betray Jock, and this is too good of a deal for the banks to pass up. Bobby tries to keep Pamela from checking on Lil John, but she's frantic and determined. Sue Ellen is still paralyzed with fear of the baby, but she doesn't want Pamela bonding with the child either, and making her look inept. Ellby sees through Sue Ellen's rantings and explains that Sue Ellen is afraid of being hurt again. and that the only way to overcome that fear is to go out on a limb and try to love again, tying her willingness to be an active mother and to jump into a love affair with Dusty Farlow together.
You said that Dusty seemed different from Cliff or JR.
But maybe I'm just unable to choose the right man.
Lucy also calls out Sue Ellen for refusing to be involved with John. She recalls her relationship with her own parents and threatens to show JR3 how to be a real black sheep.
Don't worry about him, Sue Ellen. His cousin Lucy will teach him how to survive in this family.
They're all gonna laugh at you!
This legitimately seems to frighten Sue Ellen. Meanwhile, Ray's construction project unearths an old skeleton, setting up a major arc near the end of the season. And then, when all is lost for JR, they phone in the end of the plot. Literally, JR just takes a call from Hank and learns that the Asian oil wells have come in.
I don't have time for that coincidence. Oh!
Everyone is able to breathe a sigh of relief, but all is not forgiven, which is a concept that JR doesn't seem to understand.
Isn't anybody gonna say something like, "Thank you, JR, for making us billionaires"?
Pamela sneaks out of the party to check on John Ross, only to find a happy Sue Ellen holding him in her arms. Pamela is devastated. And we're out! Mother of the Year is an episode with a lot of psychological projection from the characters onto their own situations, and it makes for an interesting, if frustrating, episode. In April of 1944, the first performance of Jean-Paul Sartre's Huis Clos was staged at the Théâtre de Vieux-Colombie in Paris, France. It is probably better known by its English-language adaptation, No Exit. The play depicts the three main characters, Garçon, Estelle, and Inez, trapped in a room together in hell. Only the hell they're trapped in doesn't have the medieval torture devices they were expecting. In fact, the room is quite lovely, ornate, lavish even. But as they begin to interact with one another, they expose the raw parts of their humanity. Garçon is a deserter of the World War II French army, who cheated on his wife, even going so far as to make his wife listen as he had sex with his mistress, and then have his wife serve them coffee in bed. Estelle is a beautiful socialite who married an older man for his money, but had an affair with a younger, more virile man. She regarded the affair as a fling, but the other man fell in love with her. Distraught after bearing her lover's child, she flung the child into the ocean, causing the younger man to commit suicide. Inez is a lesbian manipulator who openly admits to being a cruel person, and she has no time for Garçon and Estelle's denials. For obvious reasons, the other two hate Inez when she first arrives. Over the course of the play, Garçon and Estelle try to comfort each other. Garçon desires to be seen as masculine and brave, though he's actually a coward and weak. He thinks that if he can seduce Estelle, who admits to lusting over virile masculine men, that he will prove his manhood. Estelle does flirt with Garçon, but Inez rains on his parade by telling him that Estelle is only interested in him because she wants the attention of a man. Any man. Garçon, who for the entirety of the play has been trying to desert hell in the same way that he deserted the French army, finally has the chance to leave when a door to the room opens. And he finds himself paralyzed, unable to walk through it. He cannot escape hell because he'll know deep down that Inez knows that he's a coward. And that, for him, is a personal hell. This prompts Garçon to utter the play's most famous line.
Hell is other people.
I bring all this up because it helps explain Sue Ellen's psychological paralysis where Dusty and John Ross are concerned. Sue Ellen has the option of divorce and Dusty is waiting for her, openly telling her how much he wants to settle down and be with her. The door is open. But like Garçon, she can't bring herself to walk through it because when someone is psychologically abused for so long, they become dependent on the opinions of their abusers until there's a moment of clarity, and Sue Ellen hasn't quite had her moment of clarity yet. The other major projector in this episode is Pamela, who's beginning her descent into an unhinged baby-snatching harpy. And yes, that is an irritating character assassination that Victoria Principal never fully recovers from. But it does make sense in the grand scheme of things. Remember, Pamela doesn't just develop baby malaria out of nowhere. Pamela and Cliff have had to be caretakers for their own father most of their lives. Taking care of people is her default, and having someone to take care of is part of her identity. The neurofibromatosis and miscarriage has just exacerbated something that already existed in her.
Neurofibromatosis.
Speaking of Cliff, his unwarranted tirade against Sue Ellen also stems from his own projection. A parasite who is incapable of love and only uses people for their own gain describes exactly one person in the Cliff and Sue Ellen relationship. And it ain't Sue Ellen. It's just one scene in a long line that features people criticizing Sue Ellen's decisions. Only Dr. Hannibal Ellby tells Sue Ellen that she has the power to be the woman and mother that she wants to be, and of all people, it's Lucy who scares Sue Ellen straight.
Oh boy.
But that's also one of the episode's failings, as we have to have nearly every character in the show scream at Sue Ellen to take the next step, only to have her start over again at the beginning of the next scene. As a result, the episode becomes a bit of a grind, pacing-wise. Finally, we come to JR, who gets bailed out by fate at the end, and it's sad to watch this grown man who just wants to be seen as this big titan of industry reduced to begging for validation.
Isn't anybody gonna say something like, "Thank you, JR, for making us billionaires"?
I mean, obviously he's still evil, but you still feel some empathy for him. Along with Ellie Saves the Day, this is a good 1-2 punch that wraps up the first part of the Asian oil well deal and launches Sue Ellen slightly out of her comfort zone, something that's going to have major implications for her, JR, and Dusty Farlow.